Well, you made it back safe, at least from LSIEU 2022, with luggage intact this time.
This time, yes, I did. I'm happy to say, and you as well. I like the fact that we're back sitting across from each other on the other side of the pond again.
It's good. This was a great trip.
Oh, phenomenal.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Pentel outdid himself.
Yes.
LSI, what a
Yes.
great property, first
Yes.
of all. And that can't go underrated because the facility, the Grove, had walking paths where you saw the VCs and the strategics and the service providers all walking along. I mean, it was really like the Davos of medtech over in Europe.
Yeah, it was beautiful. Yeah, I think we have to give a shout out to Nadine for site selection, right? It was an absolutely gorgeous venue. And you're right, it gave you an opportunity to have traditional meetings, to have walk and talks. It was just a really perfect venue for an intimate setting that we had there.
Yeah. And it was the inaugural session for LSI OUS, right? So Scott and his team have done a tremendous job in Dana Point over the last few years, and the courage to jump over there, because there's been a gap now with certain organizations not putting on shows that we have become accustomed to. I think Scott raised the bar, and the event had strategics, investors, service providers, and the people looking for financing.
Yeah, well, we've known for many, many years that so much innovation starts outside the U.S., and it was nice to see easier access for so many organizations coming from Israel, from Germany, from outside of the United States in terms of inception, and being able to get the visibility that we're accustomed to with some of our stateside shows.
Yeah, and UK is a really good spot to have that, because the amount of innovation coming out of the UK, the investment dollars coming out of the UK, I think other than Israel, pound for pound, it's become a force outside the U.S. and medtech.
Exactly. Yeah. Historically, great manufacturing, but now we're seeing real, true innovation, beginning to end. So it's a really interesting time to see how things are becoming more global in focus.
Yeah, and we had the chance to moderate a few panels there. One of them was Medtronic's sort of acknowledgement of their digital transition. And their team that was there did a fabulous job. And again, kudos to Medtronic, because a lot of times the strategics will play it incredibly safe. And they'll get on some of these panels, and you'll have crafted talking points that have been okayed by their sort of IR team. But the digital team that showed up there on behalf of Medtronic was courageous, was forward-looking, wasn't pandering to the investors. And I'd love to see some of the other big strategics get in there, because they have a responsibility to where the emerging tech markets are going in part.
Oh, absolutely. It was a breath of fresh air to see them there, and they were open and inviting and engaging with the young innovative companies. So I thought that was a real step in the right direction.
What did you walk away with in regards to, what was your gut feel? What was the theme of the show? One, as a talent advisor, right, and as a company builder.
Well, I think the overarching theme to me was, I walked away saying, okay, so 2016 to 2018 was all about robotics, and 2018 to 2021 was all about data. And now, what's next? So you made a great point on your surgical robotics panel that you hosted. You got the bot, now what? I walked away thinking, okay, you have data, now what? And so many of these innovative companies did a tremendous job of really pulling back the curtain and saying, here's the true value, which is what investors, patients, clinicians, the market really cares about. Okay, show us where the patient's going to benefit. What is the real unmet need that we're addressing, and how is it going to streamline costs and care in a clinical setting? And because it was almost a black magic idea, right? The data integration, and what are we going to do with it? Oh, we'll have all this information. It was great to see some real organizations pull through, and a few different areas, in terms of specifics. The diagnostics capabilities are confounding. There are a couple companies, one in particular, the Myo One, that's dealing with compartment syndrome. I mean, we're talking about people who are, this organization with a simple diagnostic can make the difference between amputation or not. And saving lives is, this is an enormous opportunity, and completely just going by surgeon intuition right now, right? And early detection is dealing with a whole litany of cancers. We all know that the sooner you get diagnosis, the better that your prognosis will be. And they've got a 15-minute point-of-care diagnostic. That's just, it's mind-blowing what they can capture now. So it's nice to see we have the data and we're actually leveraging it in really smart ways.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we always do when we attend these shows and we have these sit-downs in the studio is always thinking about your career. So we always want to say, look, there's a couple things to consider. When you're looking at a new market, what's the legs on that market over the next 5 years? And then when you're looking at a new company, what are the legs on that company within that market over the next 5 years? Because odds are you're going to stay in this role for 5 years. And then who's the team you're working with that works in that company, that's addressing that market, that has legs, again, over the next 5 years. So I tend to agree. I like the AI side and the data side on diagnostics, no doubt. But what was clear in this session was, look, you have these geopolitical sort of scenarios going on around the world right now. You've got interest rates and inflation that are trending right now in a less than optimal direction. You've got a lot of money in the ecosystem. But the ecosystem right now is going, okay, we over-index towards digital, right? COVID did it to us. You know, that COVID accelerated 10 years, 12 years of medtech in a 2-year period because we wasn't sure where that was going. So as you make these career decisions, we're watching the A and B round companies. The good technologies will get funding. The technologies that can't articulate how does this move healthcare forward in a very tangible way and hits outcomes. Now, my fear there, though, is we're asking questions about the current standard of care in the current day with retrospective ideas in mind. And I'm always a little afraid that digital is a little ahead of its time. We got a taste of digital. We know what it can do. Let's just hope we don't totally pull everything back on digital right now, because it's a domain, whether it's telehealth, whether it's surgical robotics, whether it's narrow AI on the diagnostic side, it needs to continue to be fed.
Oh, 100%. Couldn't agree more on that. And you know, for just simplicity, even to benefit the companies that were there are organizations looking at digitizing opportunities for clinical trials. Okay, let's just say clinical trials. That was one of the biggest burns and burdens for our young companies for the decades that we've been in the industry. We've got organizations that are like Hawthorne Effect and organizations that are taking opportunity from the digital domain and providing access to patients, providing access to information to the population that we had to just watch and wait until somebody walked into the hospital. So there's a lot of opportunity there, and we have to make sure that we integrate it appropriately into the healthcare of today and where we're going, not just, like you said, where we've been.
And you bring up a great point. There's two areas that emerging tech companies, startups, don't usually address. If they're lucky enough, they get to address them. And it's the large pay forward in clinical trial work and the large pay forward in building out the commercial teams. What do I mean by that? Most of the time when you're going through R&D, it's like little iterative investments along the way. You try something, you tweak it, you can change it, you invested some money, but it wasn't an entire funding round that had to come into the organization in order to move it forward. When you start to look at clinical trials, you're looking at tens of millions of dollars. If it's a PMA, you know, close to $100 million. And the same thing with the sales organization. You don't know until you start to put the sales organization together. You deploy, again, millions or tens of millions of dollars, and then you have to wait 6 months to a year. Clinical trial or a sales initiative. And so oftentimes a full round is raised for clinical trial. Oftentimes a full round is raised for sales. And you don't get that iterative tweak, check. Check.
Right.
So it's a somewhat of a, not blind, but we've got to pay it forward, and we don't know what's going to happen at the end with our endpoints or our commercial plan on acceptance, adoption, and ongoing utilization. So this is a very precarious time for emerging tech startups looking to raise that round in both of those areas.
Yeah, and it also means we need brave investors too, who are willing to swing big, because if we're really going all in on the next frontier in healthcare, it's going to take that level of commitment. I see a lot of organizations right now pulling in small chunks here and small chunks there, just trying to keep the engine going. If we're really going to make a difference, we're going to have to make sure we're looking big picture at the entire ecosystem change and how that's going to really make for elevation of healthcare overall.
Yeah. So Dana Point, I think, is coming up in April. I'm sorry I don't have the date with me. Over in LSI Dana Point in April, May timeframe. So strongly recommend the emerging tech startups, the strategics, and the service providers to attend.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I had a number of industry professionals saying, where's the venture community at this show? I know that they were streaming, and I know that they were visible, and they're present. So there's a lot of eyes on this. So it's a great show, and it's become even more powerful now that it's curated and really structured for innovative, intimate conversations.
Yeah, and you mentioned streaming. Before I close up here, I want to mention this to the venture people. I know you could stream, and I know you could not show up, and I know you could pick the 6 or 10 different properties or startups that you want to look at. But I will tell you this. Throughout our lives, there are always unintended consequences. And when I use the word unintended consequences, usually it infers a negative outcome. But let's think about it on the positive side. I can't tell you how many CEOs or how many VCs I've talked to over my 30 plus years were at a show in person. And they had no intention of running into somebody at lunch or cocktails afterwards or the social mix after hours that goes on. And out of that came the unintentional investment because you met somebody by happenstance. So listen, watch it online if you have to. Go there is a must to get the opportunity of the unintended positive consequence that if not but for you would have never got. Agree.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So many healthy conversations are happening over cocktails or in the elevator or when someone's jogging by you on the path. This is where the magic happens.
Agreed. Well, I'm Joe Mullings. On behalf of Holly Scott from 160 Studios, be well.